I'm sorry, but there is only room for one conversation at the dinner table. Bari Weiss and the rest of her kind can kindly step away. This is the Life Given podcast. I'm Isaac Lopez. Honestly, this story might have passed you in your news feed as quick as that. This story probably was not covered by many news outlets, and if it was quickly swept under the rug as more important stories came to the forefront. And so that's why I think it's actually important that we discuss this for this episode. Journalism, objective journalism, is truly a farcical thing in our society. And I think the story of Bari Weiss shows us this. And she, as a New York Times editor, having worked there for the last 3.5 years, had initially been hired on. This is coming straight from her resignation, open letter resignation, um, came from the fact that the paper did not change. They hired her on because they saw that there was that the New York Times, among many media outlets, did not understand what Americans actually thought after Donald Trump won the presidency, after he won the election. They saw that they were completely off in understanding this, in understanding what the American people actually wanted. So they decided to hire on centrists, some conservatives, to try to balance it out. But 3.5 years later, Bari Weiss found no change in attitude, actually found a rather hostile work environment, and was repeatedly, her name was repeatedly defamed. She went through some just tough verbal times. And honestly, this is really just kind of a good lens or a good measurement of kind of the state of journalism today. Because really what we're looking at is what came out the crapper, right? I mean, this is a dung heap that has been piling up for a decade now, really in the last 5 or 6 years. And it was before the President Trump election, mind you. This stuff was going on, but it's been highlighted ever since he was elected. And now we're just kind of looking at the remains. And we're just kind of poking through the garbage heap. And this is a nice little litmus test for where journalism stands today in the United States. So that's what I want to look at today with Bari Weiss. There is truly only one conversation welcomed at the table of major news outlets. And much like in every other places in America and every other kind of industry, any form of dissidence, any form of contradiction is going to get rid of very quickly, is going to be gotten rid of very quickly. And you will find yourself on the bottom of the heap after having risen so far. And Bari Weiss, who was a very successful editor at the New York Times, at the very least controversial, and therefore had a nice following, she is out the door and she's resigned. And I want to pull a few things from her letter and then kind of springboard into a call to action because I think that this is an area that truly needs evangelism, needs Christians taking the word of Christ, the word of God into the culture through the use of this medium, and that is news outlets. So let's begin with her letter. So this is her take on how this is following her paragraph, her opening, saying that she was hired on by the New York Times to try to get different voices in the conversation. And I quote, "But the lessons that ought to have followed the election, lessons about the importance of understanding other Americans, the necessity of resisting tribalism, and the centrality of the free exchange of ideas to a democratic society have not been learned. Instead, a new consensus has emerged in the press, but perhaps especially at this paper, that truth isn't a process of collective discovery, but an orthodoxy already known to an enlightened few, whose job is to inform everyone else." And I think that this only confirms really what we have suspected and thrown out there for the last 3.5 years, because Trump has gone out of his way to call out fake news. And I think you can call something that tries to hide its biases as objectivity fake news. I think it's completely fair to call a site who claims to try to be delivering the objective truth or tries to be a marketplace of ideas, uh, but instead they only represent one idea, one ideology. You can call that fake news. That's completely fine by me. She goes on to just describe her experience. Part of me wishes I could say that my experience was unique, but the truth is that intellectual curiosity, let alone risk taking, is now a liability at the Times. Why edit something challenging to our readers or write something bold only to go through the numbing process of making it ideologically kosher, when we can assure ourselves of job security and clicks by publishing our 4,000th op-ed arguing that Donald Trump is a unique danger to the country and the world? And so self-censorship has become the norm. A very insightful statement that I think is very true, that we've seen throughout multiple mediums, whether it's sports, whether it's uh, education, whether it's media. People are either self-censoring, or if they don't have the self-control to censor themselves, other people will do it for them and get them fired very quickly. And she explains the idea, what the goal that drives them, that drives the established paper. Why? Perhaps because they believe the ultimate goal is righteous. Perhaps because they believe that they will be granted protection if they nod along, as the coin of our realm, language, is degraded in service to an ever-shifting laundry list of right causes. And this is what happens when you get subjectivity as your objective truth. When everyone's truth is their own, you get to stand wherever you want to stand. You get to shift the definitions. You get to control the game and how it's played. You get to play, in no unlikely term, you get to play at God when you control the definitions. And honestly, just reading through this, she has a great beat on a lot of, I honestly, I don't even want to get into her theology, her background, like just this letter as itself is really interesting read from an insider perspective. So this last few paragraphs I just want to read, because really I think it's great for young journalists, but also for Christians to hear this, to really realize that there is a need for more truth acknowledgement, for more people who understand the worldview and paradigm with which the world was created, to jump into media like this. Not necessarily go work for the corporate giants, but to do their own digging, their own research in their own time, and whether that's sharing with other people what you found, but that can easily take the place of a New York Times, I think, in the long run, because the New York Times, let's be honest, is not objective. So she closes, she has this great, a few quotes here that I'm going to read. All this bodes ill, especially for independent-minded young writers and editors paying close attention to what they'll have to do in advance in their careers. Rule 1, speak your mind at your own peril. Rule 2, never risk commissioning a story that goes against the narrative. Rule 3, never believe an editor or publisher who urges you to go against the grain. Eventually, the publisher will cave to the mob, the editor will get fired or reassigned, and you'll be hung out to dry. I think as a Christian in this time, if you have the core beliefs that a Christian should have, all of this, you're in risk of feeling these effects, of falling to this kind of mob mentality. Now, Bari Weiss offers some consolation. For these young writers and editors, there is one consolation. As places like the Times and other once great journalistic institutions betray their standards and lose sight of their principles, Americans still hunger for news that is accurate, opinions that are vital, and debate that is sincere. I hear from these people every day. An independent press is not a liberal idea or progressive ideal or a democratic ideal. It's an American ideal. You said a few years ago. I couldn't agree more. America is a great country that deserves a great newspaper. I couldn't amen that more. And honestly, I think that that's not necessarily, I'm going to jump here into TLG news in just a second. But we need more people that speak up wherever they are. This line, Americans still hunger for news that is accurate, opinions that are vital, and debate that is sincere. Christians hunger for the truth, no matter what the form, no matter what the medium. And your opinions are vital, and debate on social media, wherever it is, in conversation with a friend, is still sincere. And we need to recover that art. We need to recover that tool that honestly we've let the other team dominate. We've been afraid of the debate that can occur online. We've been afraid to call out fake news for what it is. And we are afraid of sharing our opinion, because when we do, we get utterly roasted on a spit and slowly burnt to death. That's what our public image takes. That's the cost it takes sometimes to speak the truth. But we need more of that. That's what the martyrs did in the early church. They spoke the truth and they got literally roasted. And what did they do? They kept coming back. It was the seed of the church was the blood of the martyrs, was it not? Then adopting some of that philosophy, some of that courage can only be a good thing in this time where only one conversation is allowed in the court of public opinion. And that's why we've started the Life Given News. I've been trying to figure out a way how to jump into this without making it a podcast episode all about a project that we're working on. But I do want to discuss that briefly here as we come to a close at the end of this podcast. I realized about a year ago, that there was a disconnect between truth and what the media was reporting. That there was quite a bit of bias that was happening in the media, and it was just ridiculous. I mean, it didn't require a sleuth, because if you asked me to be a detective, it would be a very, very bad situation for everyone involved. But I was able to realize that we need more quality content out there based around current events, because truly it is lacking from the conservative side. I mean, there are a number of great conservative podcasts and news outlets out there, but there are very few. And I think that they're doing some things very well, but I also think that they can be improved upon. And so actually, we've started to grow the Life Given News website. The news team has now, we're at 4 contributors and an editor. We have 5 people working on this team, and they're seeking to report the news in a timely fashion, because there are 2 goals that the Life Given News is looking to accomplish. The first is to try to keep everything understandable and to the point. No unnecessary fluff. We're going to try to keep our articles to 1 to 2, 3 minutes max. I mean, we're trying to keep them short, the actual reporting articles, because there will be op-eds run out in the next few months and weeks, and those will be longer. But the actual reports that are coming out from the Life Given News are trying to stay short, are trying to stay to the point. So that way, I mean, you don't see a lot of news sites doing that. A lot of articles coming out require some time to read. And really, the whole idea behind the Life Given News and podcast is that you guys just don't have the time sometimes. And so we're trying to give you the facts and strong summaries that you can engage confidently in your conversations without having to spend an hour trying to determine what is the truth in this article, what are the actual facts and not the opinions on what happens. it's so hard to find that kind of information. So that's one goal. The other goal is exactly that, to try to stay as close to the objectives as possible. So if you're interested in that kind of journalism, head on over there. It is a project in the works, but we are working the best that we can. We are working the hardest that we can to make it a site and a news outlet that you can trust and that you can become informed in a way that will help you establish yourself on the foundation of the Word of God. So if you are interested in following on social media, Life Giving News on Facebook, at TLG Podcast on Parler, at _TLG Podcast _ on Instagram, or the Life Giving News Podcast Conversation on Facebook. And you can join the conversation in the group that is growing there. Once again, I hope that you all have a great rest of your week, and I will see you on Friday. Remember that the life that you've been given and the life that you have received includes every area of life. Why should current events be the exception? God bless.